The radar screen flickered with an anomaly that shouldn't exist. Dr. Rebecca Thornfield stared at the impossible readout, her coffee growing cold in her trembling hand. For 3 weeks, her team had been scanning the desert floor of southeastern Utah, searching for remnants of ancient Puebloan settlements. What they found instead would rewrite human history. It was October 7th, 2023, and the autumn sun beat down mercilessly on the Red Rock Canyon country. The air shimmered with heat waves, distorting the distant mesas into liquid mirages. Rebecca had been working in archaeological geophysics for 17 years, and she had never seen readings like these. The ground-penetrating radar showed a massive void, a perfect geometric cavity buried 300 feet beneath the sandstone in a location where natural cave formation was geologically impossible. Her colleague, Dr. Marcus Chen, leaned over her shoulder, his shadow providing momentary relief from the glare. He studied the data with the methodical precision that had made him one of the most respected geologists in North America. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an edge of disbelief that sent chills down Rebecca's spine despite the oppressive heat. The void measured approximately 200 feet in diameter and 60 feet in height. Its walls appeared smooth, almost polished, creating radar signatures that suggested artificial construction. But that was impossible. The rock strata surrounding it dated back 23 million years to the Miocene epoch, long before humans walked the earth. Yet the void existed, hidden beneath layers of compressed sandstone and volcanic ash, waiting. Rebecca's mind raced through possibilities, each more unlikely than the last. Natural gas pocket? No, the shape was too regular. Ancient lava tube? Wrong geological formation entirely. Collapsed limestone cavern? The surrounding rock was all sandstone. Every rational explanation crumbled under scrutiny, leaving only the irrational, the unthinkable. The discovery site sat on federal land 20 miles from the nearest town, a tiny community called Redstone that served as a supply hub for researchers and the occasional adventure tourist. The landscape here told a story of deep time, of continents colliding and seas retreating, of volcanoes erupting and rivers cutting through stone as if it were butter. In this land where the bones of the earth lay exposed, where dinosaur fossils weathered out of cliff faces and ancient seabeds stretched across desert valleys, the void was an aberration, a wrong note in a symphony that had played unchanged for eons. Rebecca made the call to the university that evening, speaking carefully, aware that what she was reporting could either make her career or destroy her credibility forever. Dr. Helena Voss, the department chair, listened without interruption. There was a long pause after Rebecca finished, filled only with the faint hiss of the satellite connection and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. When Helena finally responded, her voice was guarded but intense. She authorized an expansion of the research team and secured emergency funding. Within 48 hours, specialists began arriving at the site. Structural engineers, paleontologists, historians specializing in ancient civilizations, and even representatives from the Geological Survey. The tiny base camp swelled to accommodate 30 people, their tents and equipment trucks forming a small city in the wilderness. Dr. James Wu arrived on the third day, a specialist in subsurface imaging whose techniques had revealed hidden chambers in Egyptian pyramids and Mayan temples. He brought with him an array of equipment that made Rebecca's ground-penetrating radar look primitive by comparison. As his team set up, he explained that they would use a combination of electromagnetic induction, seismic refraction, and gravimetric analysis to build a complete three-dimensional model of the void and its surroundings. The work proceeded with military precision. Every inch of ground for half a mile in every direction was scanned, measured, analyzed. The data began to paint a picture that defied comprehension. The void was not alone. faint traces suggested a network of passages, most collapsed or filled with debris, but some possibly intact. These passages appeared to radiate outward from the central chamber like spokes on a wheel, each one following a precise geometric pattern. At night, the team gathered around portable heaters and discussed their findings in hushed, almost reverent tones. The stars overhead blazed with an intensity rarely seen in modern times, the Milky Way a river of light across the black vault of heaven. In this ancient place, beneath these eternal stars, they were touching something that challenged every assumption about the timeline of intelligent life on Earth. Marcus discovered the first inscription on day 7. It wasn't on the surface, but deep within the rock strata, detected by acoustic scanning. The pattern was regular, repeating, unmistakably artificial. When James processed the data and projected it onto a screen, the room fell silent. The symbols were unlike any known written language, yet they possessed an ordered complexity that spoke of sophisticated thought and purpose. Dr. Sarah Nakamura, a linguist who specialized in undeciphered ancient scripts, spent 3 days analyzing the inscription. She compared it to every known writing system, from Sumerian cuneiform to Easter Island's Rongo-Rongo, from the Indus Valley script to Linear A. Nothing matched. The symbols seemed to operate on mathematical principles, incorporating geometric shapes that repeated in fractal patterns. It was code and art and mathematics all woven together in a way that suggested a mind vastly different from human cognition, yet undeniably intelligent. The team faced a critical decision. To learn more, they would need to drill down to the void itself, but drilling carried risks. What if they compromised the structural integrity of the chamber? What if there was something down there that needed to remain sealed? The ethical implications weighed heavily on everyone, particularly Rebecca, whose initial discovery had set this entire chain of events in motion. They brought in experts in hazardous environment protocols, the kind of people who investigated forgotten nuclear sites and explored abandoned mines. These professionals assessed the situation with cold practicality, identifying risks and mitigation strategies. Their conclusion was cautious but affirmative. With proper precautions, they could create an access shaft. The drilling began on a Monday morning in late October. The air had turned crisp with approaching winter, and the first frost had painted delicate crystals on the camp's equipment. The drill rig, a massive piece of machinery transported in sections and assembled on site, began its slow, careful penetration of the earth. The plan called for a 6-inch pilot hole first, to allow cameras and sensors to survey the chamber before committing to a larger access shaft. Progress was maddeningly slow. The ancient rock, compressed by millions of years of weight, resisted the diamond-tipped drill bit with stubborn resilience. 15 feet per day was considered good progress. At that rate, reaching the void would take 3 weeks. Rebecca spent her days monitoring data feeds and her nights lying awake in her tent, wondering what they would find in the darkness below. Strange things began happening around the camp. Equipment malfunctioned without explanation. Compasses spun wildly, unable to find magnetic north. Electronic devices experienced brief, inexplicable power surges. At first, these incidents were dismissed as coincidence or interference from all the equipment operating in close proximity. But as they became more frequent and more pronounced, even the skeptics began to take notice. On day 12 of drilling, at a depth of 180 feet, the drill bit broke through into empty space. The sudden loss of resistance sent a shudder through the entire rig, and for a moment Rebecca's heart stopped. They had reached a passage, one of the spoke-like corridors radiating from the central chamber. James immediately deployed a fiber optic camera, lowering it carefully through the narrow hole. What they saw on the monitors defied belief. The passage was not carved roughly through rock, but constructed with precision that would challenge modern engineering. The walls were smooth, almost glass-like, and appeared to be coated with a substance that reflected their lights, with an odd, pearlescent shimmer. The passage extended beyond the range of their cameras in both directions, perfectly straight, sloping gently downward toward what must be the central void. The air that emerged from the drill hole was another mystery. It was dry and cool, with a faint metallic scent that reminded Rebecca of lightning-charged air after a thunderstorm. Initial analysis showed it was similar to surface atmosphere, but with slightly elevated levels of argon and trace elements of gases that shouldn't be present in such concentrations deep underground. They expanded the hole carefully, working around the clock in shifts. Rebecca barely slept, surviving on coffee and nervous energy. The passage they had breached was large enough to have allowed a person to walk through comfortably, though no human feet had trod there for countless millennia. The question that haunted everyone was simple yet profound. Who built this, and when? The breakthrough came from Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a chronologist who specialized in radiometric dating. She had been analyzing mineral samples extracted during drilling, comparing isotope ratios and crystalline structures. Her findings pointed to something that should have been impossible. While the rock surrounding the void was indeed over 20 million years old, the surfaces of the passage showed evidence of modification only 75,000 years ago. 75,000 years placed the construction firmly in the Middle Paleolithic, the age of Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens. But neither species possessed technology remotely capable of tunneling 300 feet through solid rock and creating passages with such precision. The tools of that era were stone and bone, fire and sinew. What they were seeing required advanced knowledge of engineering, material science, and energy sources that wouldn't be developed for tens of thousands of years, unless everything they knew about human history was wrong. The media got wind of the discovery in early November. Despite the team's efforts to maintain secrecy, word leaked out. Within days, the site was surrounded by journalists, curious onlookers, and conspiracy theorists who set up camps outside the security perimeter. Helicopters buzzed overhead like mechanical vultures. The peaceful isolation of the dig site transformed into a circus, adding pressure to the already tense situation. Rebecca found herself thrust into the role of spokesperson, giving carefully worded press conferences that revealed enough to satisfy public curiosity while protecting the integrity of the research. She spoke of an unusual geological formation that showed signs of human interest in prehistory. She did not mention the impossibility of the dates, the sophistication of the construction, or the growing list of anomalies that kept her team awake at night. The government took notice. Representatives from various agencies arrived, some wearing suits and carrying credentials that gave them authority to observe and ask questions, but provided no information in return. The nature of the project changed subtly but unmistakably. What had begun as scientific inquiry now had implications for national security, though exactly why remained frustratingly unclear to the researchers. On November 15th, they completed the access shaft. It was a tube of reinforced steel, 3 feet in diameter, descending at a carefully calculated angle to intersect with the passage at a structurally sound point. The final section of rock was removed late in the afternoon as the sun painted the canyon walls in shades of crimson and gold. When the last barrier fell away, a gust of air emerged from below, carrying with it that same strange metallic scent and something else, something that no instrument could measure but every person present felt. A sense of presence, of waiting, of something momentous about to unfold. Rebecca volunteered to make the first descent. As team leader, she argued it was her responsibility. Marcus objected strenuously, citing safety protocols, and the need to preserve the project's leadership if something went wrong. They compromised. Marcus would go first, with Rebecca following immediately after. A third team member, Dr. Lisa Hammond, a cave rescue specialist, would accompany them. If anything happened to the first pair, Lisa had the training to get them out. They prepared with meticulous care, double-checking harnesses, lights, communication equipment, and emergency supplies. The plan was simple. They would descend the shaft, enter the passage, and proceed 200 feet toward the central chamber before returning. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. Observe, document, and come back. The descent began just after sunset. Marcus disappeared into the shaft first, his headlamp creating a cone of light that quickly diminished to a faint glow, then nothing. Rebecca followed, the metal walls of the shaft cool against her gloved hands as she controlled her descent with practiced ease. The temperature dropped steadily as she went deeper, the dry heat of the surface giving way to a chill that seemed to emanate from the rock itself. At 280 feet, she emerged from the shaft into the passage. Marcus was there, standing on the smooth floor, his expression hidden behind the face mask of his environmental suit, but his body language speaking of awe. Rebecca joined him, and together they waited for Lisa to complete her descent. The passage was more impressive in person than any camera could convey. The walls curved gently, meeting the floor and ceiling in perfectly smooth transitions. The surface had that strange, pearlescent quality they had seen on the video feeds, and up close, Rebecca could see patterns within the shimmer, like oil on water, suggesting layers of different materials fused together in some process she couldn't begin to understand. They activated their instruments, taking readings of air quality, radiation levels, electromagnetic fields. Everything was within safe parameters, though the EM readings were higher than expected, pulsing with a faint rhythm that reminded Rebecca of a heartbeat. She pushed the fanciful thought aside and focused on the scientific data. They moved forward slowly, their lights revealing the passage ahead in increments. Every surface was documented with helmet cameras, every step measured and recorded. The passage sloped downward at a precise 10-degree angle, heading toward the central void that lay somewhere ahead in the darkness. After 50 feet, they encountered the first feature. Set into the wall was a rectangular panel, approximately 3 feet wide and 5 feet tall. Unlike the smooth walls surrounding it, this panel had texture, a complex pattern of ridges and grooves that formed the same sort of geometric designs they had seen in the inscriptions. Marcus reached out to touch it, and Rebecca was about to warn him against it when his fingers made contact with the surface. Light bloomed within the panel, soft and blue-white, tracing the grooves and spreading outward like water, filling a network of channels. The effect was beautiful and terrifying. The light pulsed gently, and with each pulse, more of the passage illuminated, panels they hadn't noticed before coming to life in sequence, creating a pathway of light that extended into the distance. They should have retreated immediately. That was the protocol, the sensible response to unexpected activation of ancient mechanisms. But the lights were not threatening, and their instruments showed no increase in radiation, no release of harmful gases, no structural instability. The passage was simply lighting up, welcoming them perhaps, or warning them. It was impossible to tell. Marcus's voice crackled over the radio, distorted by the increasing EM interference. He suggested they continue just a bit further to see what else might activate. Lisa agreed, her professional caution overridden by curiosity. Rebecca found herself nodding, taking another step forward, then another. The passage opened into a larger space without warning. One moment they were in a corridor, the next they stood at the threshold of the central chamber, and all thoughts of caution fled in the face of what they saw. The void was not empty. In the center of the chamber stood a structure, a cylinder, perhaps 30 feet in diameter and 50 feet tall, made of the same pearlescent material as the passage walls, but darker, almost black. shot through with veins of color that pulsed with inner light. The cylinder appeared to be rotating slowly, though Rebecca's eyes couldn't quite track the movement. It might have been an optical illusion created by the patterns of light moving across its surface, or it might have been actual physical rotation. Either way, it was mesmerizing, hypnotic. Around the central cylinder, arranged in concentric circles, were objects that looked like nothing Rebecca had ever seen. Some were geometric solids, perfect polyhedrons that hovered inches above the floor without visible support. Others were more organic in shape, like fossilized creatures from an alien ocean, all curves and spirals and strange symmetries. Each object glowed with its own soft light, creating a constellation of colors that painted the chamber walls in shifting patterns. The ceiling overhead was a dome, and it was covered in writing, the same complex symbolic script they had found in the rock strata, but here it was alive, glowing, pulsing with meaning they couldn't grasp. Rebecca tilted her head back, trying to take it all in, and felt a strange sensation, as if the symbols were trying to communicate directly with her mind, bypassing language entirely. Marcus was recording everything, his instruments whirring and clicking, capturing data that would take years to analyze. Lisa moved around the perimeter of the chamber, checking for structural concerns, her professionalism holding despite the overwhelming strangeness of the environment. Rebecca approached the central cylinder cautiously, drawn by a curiosity that was almost compulsive. Up close, she could see that the surface was not solid, but composed of countless tiny elements, each one moving independently, yet part of a larger coordinated whole. It reminded her of a murmuration of starlings, individual components creating emergent collective behavior. She was reaching out to touch it when the cylinder responded. The rotation, if that's what it was, accelerated. The lights within brightened, and then, without warning, the cylinder projected an image into the air above it. The hologram, for lack of a better term, showed the Earth, but not as it currently existed. The continents were in different positions, the climate zones altered. It was the Earth of the late Pleistocene, 75,000 years ago, the Ice Age world that humans had inhabited as scattered bands of hunter-gatherers. But the image showed something impossible. Cities, or what looked like cities, though their architecture was unlike anything in the human historical record. Structures that seemed to grow organically from the landscape, blending technology and nature in seamless integration. The image shifted, zooming in on one particular location. Rebecca recognized the geography with a shock of recognition. It was here, this very spot in what would one day be called Utah. But instead of empty desert, there was a community, beings that looked almost human but not quite, their proportions slightly off, their movements suggesting a different relationship with gravity, or perhaps a different musculature. These beings were constructing something, working with tools and methods that Rebecca couldn't decipher. They moved with purpose and coordination, building what would become the chamber and its passages, creating this impossible monument and sealing it away beneath layers of stone, preserving it through the vast stretches of time that would follow. The image changed again, showing a catastrophe. Fire from the sky, though whether it was meteors or volcanic eruptions or something else entirely was unclear. The cities were destroyed, the civilization obliterated. The beings fled or perished, leaving behind only traces, echoes, and this chamber, this message, waiting to be found by whoever might follow in their footsteps. The hologram faded, and the chamber returned to its former state, the cylinder spinning slowly, the strange objects maintaining their silent vigil. Rebecca realized she was crying, tears running down her face inside her helmet, overwhelmed by the implications of what they had witnessed. They were not the first. Humanity was not the first intelligent species to walk the earth, to build and dream and create. Before us there had been others, separated from us by such vast gulfs of time that all trace of them had been erased from the geological record, save for this single, carefully preserved capsule of knowledge. The questions flooded in, each one more profound than the last. Who were they? What had happened to them? Had any survived the catastrophe, perhaps evolving over millions of years into something else, something we might know by another name? Or had they truly vanished, leaving the Earth empty for the slow process of evolution to begin again, eventually producing humanity? And why had they built this chamber? Was it simply a time capsule, a message in a bottle cast into the deep ocean of time? Or did it serve some other purpose, one they had yet to discover? Marcus called out, his voice tight with excitement and fear. He had found something in one of the alcoves that lined the chamber walls. Rebecca and Lisa joined him, their lights combining to illuminate what he had discovered. It was a skeleton, or something like a skeleton. The bones were the wrong size, the joints articulated in ways that human anatomy did not allow for. The skull was elongated, the eye sockets larger than human proportions would suggest. It lay in a position of repose, carefully arranged, as if this chamber had served as a tomb as well as a monument. Around the skeleton were artifacts, tools, and devices, whose purposes they could only guess at. Some looked vaguely familiar, variations on themes that humanity would independently develop tens of thousands of years later. Others were completely alien, their functions inscrutable. Lisa's voice broke the silence, practical and grounding. They needed to return to the surface, report their findings, and organize a proper exploration with additional resources and expertise. As much as Rebecca wanted to stay, to spend hours or days examining every detail of the chamber, she knew Lisa was right. They had come down for a reconnaissance mission, and they had found more than anyone could have imagined. It was time to bring that knowledge back to the light. The ascent was surreal, climbing away from wonders and returning to the ordinary world of desert and sky. When Rebecca emerged from the shaft, the stars were out again, and the camp was alive with anxious activity. The team had been monitoring their descent, had seen the video feeds go strange and distorted, had heard their shocked exclamations. Everyone knew that something extraordinary had been found, but only the three who had descended truly understood what they had witnessed. Rebecca called an emergency meeting, gathering the entire team in the largest tent. She described what they had found, and even as she spoke, even using careful, precise scientific language, the words sounded like fantasy, like the fever dreams of an overactive imagination. But the video footage, corrupted and fragmentary as it was, provided corroboration. The chamber existed. The cylinder was real. The evidence of a precursor civilization was undeniable. The debate that followed lasted into the early hours of the morning. Some argued for immediate publication, for sharing the discovery with the world without delay. Others cautioned that extraordinary claims required extraordinary evidence, that they needed to conduct months or years of detailed study before going public. The government representatives listened impassively, saying little, but Rebecca could see the calculations happening behind their eyes. In the end, they agreed on a compromise. They would continue the research, expand the exploration, document everything with rigorous scientific methodology. A select group of additional specialists would be brought in, experts in fields ranging from materials science to evolutionary biology to theoretical physics, and they would prepare a paper, a comprehensive report that would present their findings to the scientific community and, by extension, to the world. But even as they made these plans, Rebecca felt a growing unease. The chamber had been sealed for 75,000 years, hidden and protected. Now they had breached that seal, exposed the secret to the light of day. What consequences might follow from that decision? What had the builders intended? Had they wanted future intelligences to find their work, or had they been trying to hide it, to ensure that certain knowledge remained buried? The following days were a whirlwind of activity. More sophisticated equipment was brought in, allowing them to scan the chamber without physically disturbing it further. They discovered that the strange objects arranged around the central cylinder were not solid at all, but fields of some kind, matter arranged and held in place by forces they couldn't identify. When they attempted to retrieve samples for analysis, the objects simply vanished, dispersing like smoke, then reassembling moments later. The inscriptions on the dome's ceiling became a focus of intense study. Sarah Nakamura worked with a team of mathematicians and computer scientists, trying to decode the symbols. They discovered that the script was indeed mathematical in nature, but it used a base 12 number system and incorporated spatial relationships in ways that human mathematics did not typically consider. It was a language designed for minds that thought in dimensions and relationships that were foreign to human cognition. Gradually, painstakingly, they began to tease meaning from the symbols. What emerged was not a narrative or a history, but something more fundamental: instructions. The chamber was not just a tomb or a time capsule. It was a blueprint, a guide to technologies and concepts that the precursor civilization wanted to preserve. Energy generation from quantum vacuum fluctuations. Materials that could self-repair and adapt to environmental conditions. Methods of information storage that used the spin of electrons rather than electrical charges. Each translation brought new wonders and new questions. If these technologies were real, if they could be reproduced and understood, the implications for human civilization were staggering. Clean energy, sustainable materials, computational power beyond anything currently imaginable. But there were also warnings embedded in the text, cautions about the misuse of such knowledge, reminders that their civilization had fallen despite, or perhaps because of, their technological sophistication. The skeleton, once carefully excavated and subjected to analysis, revealed more mysteries. DNA extraction was impossible, the genetic material too degraded by time. But other techniques, including amino acid sequencing and protein analysis, suggested something both fascinating and disturbing. The being had been carbon-based, DNA-bearing, similar to Earth life in fundamental ways. But the details diverged significantly. It was as if evolution had taken a parallel path, arriving at intelligence and complexity through slightly different mechanisms. The implications were profound. Either this species had evolved on Earth separately from the lineage that led to humans, only to die out completely, leaving no descendants or fossil record, or they had come from elsewhere, established themselves here briefly in geological terms, and then vanished. Either possibility challenged fundamental assumptions about the uniqueness of life and intelligence. Dr. Helena Voss arrived at the site in late November, bringing with her a delegation of senior scientists and administrators from multiple universities and government agencies. Rebecca briefed them on everything they had learned, showing them the chamber, the cylinder, the artifacts, and the translations they had managed to complete. The visitors were appropriately amazed, asking questions that revealed both excitement and deep concern about the implications of the discovery. In a private conversation that evening, Helena revealed the real purpose of her visit. The government was taking over the project. The research would continue, but under classified conditions with strict information control. The official story would be that they had found an interesting archaeological site, possibly related to ancient Puebloan culture, but nothing revolutionary or world-changing. The truth would be buried, studied in secret, doled out to the public only when and if it was deemed safe to do so. Rebecca protested vehemently. This was the most important archaeological discovery in human history, proof that we were not alone in the vast sweep of time, that intelligence had arisen before and might arise again. The world deserved to know. Keeping it secret was a betrayal of the scientific principles she had devoted her life to upholding. Helena listened patiently, then explained the reasoning with sad pragmatism. The technologies hinted at in the chamber inscriptions were too dangerous to release without careful consideration. In the wrong hands, they could be weaponized, could destabilize global power structures, could lead to conflicts that might threaten human civilization itself. The precursor species had possessed such knowledge, and they had perished. Humanity needed to learn from their example, to approach such power with caution and wisdom, not rush headlong into the unknown. Rebecca understood the logic, but it left a bitter taste. She had become a scientist to discover truth and share it with the world, not to hoard secrets in the service of national security. But she was also pragmatic enough to recognize that she had little choice. The government had the authority to classify the site and the research. She could cooperate and remain part of the project, or she could refuse and be excluded, perhaps even silenced through legal means. She chose to stay, to continue the work, even under these new constraints. It was the only way to ensure that the knowledge would eventually reach the world, even if that process took longer than she would have liked. The winter months brought harsh weather to the Utah desert, snow and ice, making the work more challenging. But the research continued, the team now augmented by specialists with security clearances and expertise in sensitive technologies. They made steady progress translating the inscriptions, understanding the principles behind the mysterious cylinder, analyzing the materials that compose the chamber and its contents. One of the breakthrough discoveries came in February. The central cylinder, they determined, was not a solid object at all, but a carefully controlled singularity, a microscopic black hole held in a stable configuration by fields and forces that the precursor species had mastered. It served as a power source, drawing energy from the quantum foam of space-time itself, and as a computer using the extreme physics near the event horizon to perform calculations at speeds that made human quantum computers look like abacuses. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. The precursors had harnessed the fundamental forces of the universe in ways humanity was only beginning to theorize about. And they had left this device running for 75,000 years, stable and waiting, a testament to their engineering prowess and their hope that someone would eventually find it and learn from it. But learning from it proved challenging. The mathematics involved required new frameworks of thought, new ways of conceptualizing reality. The team brought in theoretical physicists, including some of the brightest minds in cosmology and quantum mechanics. They worked alongside the archaeologists and linguists, bridging disciplines in unprecedented ways, trying to decipher not just what the precursors had known, but how they had thought about it. Marcus made another significant discovery in March. Deep in the inscriptions, hidden in layers of meaning that required understanding multiple previous concepts, they found what appeared to be a star chart. But it wasn't a map of the sky as seen from Earth. The positions and configurations of the stars were wrong, suggesting a view from somewhere else, somewhere far away in space and time. Working with astronomers, they reverse-engineered the star positions, accounting for stellar motion and the rotation of the galaxy over vast time periods. The result was startling. The chart showed the sky as it would have appeared from a location approximately 100 light-years from Earth, viewed around 700,000 years ago. It was a map of home, perhaps, a navigation aid that had guided the precursors to this world, or a reminder of where they had come from. This finding supported the hypothesis that the precursor species had not originated on Earth, but had come from elsewhere, establishing a presence here for reasons they could only guess at. Perhaps they were explorers, surveyors of habitable worlds. Perhaps they were refugees, fleeing some catastrophe in their home system. Or perhaps they had been scientists, studying the development of life on Earth, observing and documenting the evolution of the biosphere before sealing their records and departing. The question of what had happened to them remained frustratingly unanswered. The catastrophe shown in the cylinder's hologram had been real, that much was certain. But whether it had been a natural disaster or something else, whether any of the precursors had survived and perhaps left Earth, or whether they had all perished here, the chamber provided no clear answers. By early spring, the accumulated knowledge had reached a critical mass. The team had translated enough of the inscriptions to understand the basic principles behind several precursor technologies. Engineers were beginning to attempt small-scale reproductions, working with materials and methods that stretched the limits of human manufacturing capabilities. The results were promising, but limited. They could create pale imitations of precursor devices, but not the real thing. Some crucial understanding was still missing, some insight that would bridge the gap between theory and practical application. Rebecca spent long hours in the chamber studying the cylinder, the strange, hovering objects, the elegant curves of the architecture. She felt that the answers were there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for her to see them with new eyes. The precursors had not been trying to make things difficult. They had been trying to teach, to pass on their knowledge to whoever might find this place. But the gap in time and species was so vast that even their best efforts at communication struggled to bridge it. One evening in April, Rebecca was alone in the chamber, most of the team having returned to the surface for dinner. She sat near the central cylinder, her instruments powered down, simply observing and thinking. The chamber was quiet save for the faint hum that seemed to emanate from the cylinder itself, a sound at the edge of perception that might have been physical vibration, or might have been some other phenomenon entirely. As she sat there, her mind drifting, she noticed something she had seen before, but never really processed. The patterns of light moving across the cylinder's surface were not random. They correlated with the symbols on the dome ceiling. More than that, they seemed to be responding to her presence, to the electrical activity of her brain perhaps, or to some other signal she was unconsciously emitting. On impulse, she removed her helmet, breaking protocol, but acting on an intuition she couldn't quite explain. The air in the chamber was safe to breathe. They had verified that countless times, and she needed to experience the place without barriers, without the mediation of technology. The effect was immediate and profound. Without the helmet's audio systems, she could hear the cylinder's hum more clearly, and it wasn't just sound. It was layered, complex, carrying information in harmonics and overtones that her unaided ears could detect, but her instruments had filtered out as noise. The patterns of light became clearer too, and she realized they were not just communication, but invitation, an interface designed to work with biological consciousness rather than electronic sensors. She reached out mentally, not moving her hands, but simply thinking at the cylinder, projecting curiosity and openness. And the cylinder responded. The hologram activated again, but this time it was different, more direct, more personal. Images flowed into her mind, not through her eyes, but through some other channel, bypassing the usual sensory pathways and speaking directly to her consciousness. She saw the precursors as they had been, not as alien others, but as fellow minds, experiencing the universe with senses and thoughts that were both foreign and familiar. She felt their wonder at discovering Earth, a world teeming with life, beautiful and dangerous, and full of potential. She understood their decision to establish this chamber, to leave behind a record and a teaching, hoping that one day the life on this world might evolve intelligence and find what they had left behind. And she felt their sorrow, their knowledge that their own time was ending, that the catastrophe approaching was inevitable and unsurvivable. They had not been defeated by war or weapons, but by something more subtle and more terrible. Their technology had grown beyond their wisdom, creating imbalances in the planet's systems that spiraled out of control. The very sophistication that had allowed them to thrive became the instrument of their downfall. The message was clear, and it was a warning. Intelligence and technology were not enough. Without wisdom, without restraint, without a deep understanding of the interconnected systems that supported life, Even the most advanced civilization could collapse. The precursors had learned this lesson too late to save themselves. They hoped that humanity, given the benefit of their example, might choose a different path. The vision faded, and Rebecca found herself back in the chamber, tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the weight of what she had experienced. She understood now why the government wanted to keep this secret, at least temporarily. The knowledge contained here was powerful, but the message was challenging, even threatening to the assumptions that underlay modern technological civilization. Humanity was rushing forward, pursuing growth and development with little thought to long-term consequences. The precursors had done the same, and they had paid the ultimate price, but keeping the secret forever would serve no purpose. The lesson needed to be learned, the warning heeded. The question was how to share this knowledge in a way that would promote wisdom rather than fear, that would inspire change rather than denial or despair. Rebecca emerged from the chamber determined to find that path. She consulted with Helena, with the other senior researchers, with philosophers and ethicists who had been brought into the expanded project. Together, they began crafting a strategy for gradual disclosure, a way to introduce the world to the reality of the precursors and their message without causing panic or disbelief. The plan was ambitious and long-term. First, they would publish papers on the archaeological discovery, describing the chamber in general terms without revealing the full extent of what they had found. This would prepare the scientific community and the public for the idea that human history might need revision, that the timeline of intelligence on Earth was longer and more complex than previously thought. Then, gradually, they would release more information, allowing the reality to sink in, giving society time to adjust and absorb each revelation before moving to the next. The technologies would be introduced slowly, carefully, with full consideration of their implications and risks. And the warning, the central message about the dangers of unchecked technological growth, would be woven throughout, a recurring theme that would hopefully guide humanity's choices in the crucial centuries ahead. It was not perfect, and Rebecca knew that no plan survives contact with reality unchanged, but it was something, a way forward that honored both the discovery and the responsibility that came with it. The first paper was published in June in a prestigious archaeology journal, describing the discovery of an unusual subsurface chamber in Utah with possible connections to unknown ancient cultures. The paper was carefully worded, factual but not sensational, and it generated significant interest in academic circles while avoiding mainstream media attention. It was a beginning. As summer arrived, bringing blazing heat back to the Utah desert, the research continued, each day bringing new insights and new questions. The team had grown to include nearly 100 people, all working under strict security protocols, all aware that they were part of something that would echo through history. Rebecca stood at the edge of the excavation site one evening, watching the sun set over the Red Rock Canyon country, painting the landscape in shades of amber and scarlet. She thought about the precursors, those ancient minds who had stood under these same stars, who had built wonders and made mistakes, who had hoped that their knowledge would not die with them. They were gone, their civilization vanished, their very existence forgotten, until a radar anomaly revealed their hidden monument. But their message remained, preserved in exotic materials and impossible devices, waiting to be understood and heeded. Humanity stood at a crossroads, armed with power that could reshape the world or destroy it. The precursors had walked this path before and had fallen. The question now was whether their descendants in thought, if not in biology, could learn from that failure and choose more wisely. Rebecca didn't know the answer. No one did. The future remained unwritten, a quantum superposition of possibilities that would collapse into certainty only through the choices humanity made in the years and decades to come. But at least now they had a guide, a warning from those who had gone before, a reminder that intelligence without wisdom was a path to ruin. The void that had been invisible for millennia was invisible no longer. What the radar had found had indeed broken the internet, though not in the way the sensational headline might have suggested. It had broken something deeper, the comfortable assumption that humanity was alone and unique, that the universe had waited billions of years for human intelligence to arise. That assumption was shattered, replaced by a humbling awareness of the vast sweep of time and the many forms that thought and consciousness might take. In that awareness lay both danger and hope. Danger because it revealed how fragile and temporary even advanced civilizations could be. Hope because it showed that intelligence was not a single miracle but a recurring phenomenon, that the universe itself seemed to lean toward complexity and consciousness, creating opportunities for life and thought to emerge again and again. As the stars emerged overhead, pinpricks of light in the darkening sky, Rebecca made a silent promise to the precursors, to their memory and their message. She would do everything in her power to ensure that their knowledge was used wisely, that their warning was heeded, that humanity would learn from their example and choose a path that led not to extinction, but to a sustainable, enduring future among the stars. The chamber waited in the darkness below, its secrets gradually yielding to persistent inquiry, its technologies slowly revealing their principles to human understanding. It would take decades, perhaps centuries, to fully comprehend everything the precursors had left behind. But time was something humanity had, at least for now. And in that time, guided by the wisdom of those who had gone before, perhaps humanity could build something that would last, a civilization that balanced power with restraint, technology with wisdom, ambition with sustainability. A civilization that would not merely survive but thrive, that would honor the legacy of the precursors by succeeding where they had failed. The future stretched ahead, uncertain and full of possibility. Rebecca turned away from the sunset and headed back toward the camp, toward her colleagues and the work that awaited them all. There was so much to learn, so much to do, so much at stake. The void had revealed its secrets, and those secrets would change everything. How humanity responded to that change, how they integrated this new knowledge into their understanding of themselves and their place in the universe, would determine not just the next chapter of their story, but whether there would be a story to tell at all. In the end, the message from the precursors was simple yet profound. Intelligence was not enough. Technology was not enough. What mattered was wisdom, the ability to see beyond immediate gains to long-term consequences, the humility to recognize limitations, the courage to choose restraint over recklessness. Whether humanity possessed such wisdom remained to be seen, but now at least they had a guide, a warning from across the ages, a gift from minds long vanished who had hoped that their failure might become someone else's lesson. The radar had found a void, hidden for millennia beneath the desert sand. But that void was not empty, not silent, not meaningless. It was full of knowledge, full of warning, full of hope that intelligence might yet prevail, that consciousness might endure, that the long arc of evolution might bend toward wisdom as well as complexity. And in discovering that void, in listening to its message, humanity had taken the first step on a journey whose destination remained uncertain, but whose importance could not be overstated. They had learned they were not alone in the universe, not in space, and not in time. Others had walked this path before, and though those others were gone, their wisdom remained, waiting to guide those who came after. It was a gift and a responsibility, an opportunity and a test. How humanity would respond, what they would do with this knowledge, would shape the course of their civilization for generations to come. The void had spoken, and the world would never be the same.